Happy Tuesday, everybody. It is April 9th, 2024, and the Gamecocks have wrapped up practice number 9 of spring ball, which means we are getting closer and closer to being able to see the Gamecocks take the field on April 20th under the lights at 7 o'clock at Williams-Brice Stadium for the Garnet and Black spring game. I'm Mike Yuva. Intern Joe is working elsewhere today. Guy's working at the Masters. So selfish, huh? How about that? Now, intern Joe's been doing that the last couple of years. Awesome opportunity for him, and looking forward to being able to hear stories from him. And I'm sure some of you guys will be going out to Augusta this week, so safe travels. Enjoy the Masters as it begins. I mean, shoot, we got the par 3 contest tomorrow, and then it begins on Thursday for those 4 days. And then on Sunday, of course, it's going to be a busy weekend here in the Carolinas, and obviously going out towards that Georgia, Augusta area with South Carolina women's basketball. They're going to be holding a parade after winning their 3rd national championship in program history over the weekend. So congratulations to Don Staley in the Gamecocks. So we're starting today a little bit later, 2:30 show. Let us know what your thoughts are. I'm trying to experiment with this, see if some people enjoy this a little bit more, if some people would enjoy having it at 2 o'clock. So that is the reason why we are pushing it back a little bit. We have press conferences from Shane Beamer throughout the season, but in the spring, they're at 12:30 on Tuesdays. And we wait sometimes to be able to get that press conference from South Carolina uploaded so that we can share that with you guys. So that's why we pushed it back a little bit, so we can make sure that you guys can hear from Shane in case you missed it. Some good stuff today from Coach Beamer. Talked about the scrimmage that they held, the inter-squad scrimmage this past weekend on Saturday. I think the biggest thing that I took away, and we'll hear from Shane in just a little bit, this team, they're a little banged up in different areas. So being able to get a feel for where they're at, whether it be from an offensive standpoint or whether it be trying to break down positions, right? How the quarterback's looking. And that's one question that we talked to Beamer about today. Did he see any separation? What were some of the positives he saw from the quarterbacks? Were there other positions that he saw flashes from? I think the challenging part is, and Beamer mentioned this, and if you're someone that has been following football for a long time, you already know this. And the teams that I've been a part of, going back to my college days, at this time of the year, the defense is typically ahead of the offense. Because from an offensive standpoint, especially when you have a guy that's going to be taking over, new guy at quarterback, whether you have new faces in that wide receiver room, could be new faces on the offensive line, could be guys just trying to build a rapport on the offensive line together. Could be a guy being out on the offensive line. It makes things challenging at this time of the year. So that's not an excuse for USC's offense. But if you hear from Beamer and some of the things they said, and we'll hear from the players tomorrow, and we'll get their thoughts and their assessment on what took place on Saturday of this past week. That's what I would say to people. That don't get so caught up on, okay, why aren't we hearing, that Lenore Sellers is going out there and just balling out? Why aren't we hearing maybe a guy like Robbie Ashford playing out of his mind? Those are the reasons why. Again, not excuses. It's just the reality. You can go across the country. The majority of the teams, I would say, especially through 9 spring practices at that point on Saturday, that would have been 8 spring practices. That's where they're going to be typically at. But we'll hope to see some progress from this Gamecock team, and we'll hopefully be able to see flashes in the spring game from certain players, whether it be from the wide receiver room, whether it be from the quarterback room, whether it be from the cornerback room, as South Carolina looks to provide some depth in that room. And if O.D. Fortune is the guy, if he is the top corner, if he's your number 1 corner in that spring game, or at least heading into the spring game, Judge Collier, Bakari Swain, you're trying to see who's going to be that guy across from him. Who's going to be that other starting corner? And we're going to hopefully get an opportunity to be able to see that in the spring game. And that competition's only going to roll on over into fall camp once we get into August. Having said that, though, Shane Beamer spoke with the media today. It was pretty neat. Just an extra tidbit, something that you won't be able to see from the press conference. The legendary Frank Beamer was also in attendance. He was sitting in the front row with his wife, and Emily was there too. Shane's wife, but Shane's mother was there today as well. So we got to see the whole Beamer gang, minus Hunter, in there today. So Let's listen to a little bit of what Shane had to say. The first question was getting into about injuries, and we're at a point now we're starting to look ahead to that spring game. Do we know yet what the teams are going to look like? So that's where we're going to pick things up. We'll listen to a little bit. We'll pause it. We'll discuss. If you guys have any questions, you guys have any comments, fire away, because it's just me today. Intern Joe, he's in Augusta. He's working the Masters. So you're just stuck with this jabroni today. If you have any questions, fire away, and we'll answer them throughout the show. So here's what Shane had to say today.
Shane, I know we're still 11 days out, but do you know of anybody like who won't play in the spring game due to besides the guys we already know about, nagging injuries, don't want to force anything, I guess, in a roundabout way of the two deep, how many do you estimate probably not going to play?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't want to say a handful, but it'll be a handful. We've got some things right now, David, some guys that didn't practice today just with some injuries. JT Gear didn't practice today. Nicky Manwari didn't practice today. DeBron Gatling didn't practice today. Brady Hunt didn't practice today. Tonka practiced, but was limited. So we've got some things like that some guys are battling through. We meet as a staff at 4:00. I'll have a better idea then. Again, none of those are significant and long-term at all. JT's may be a little bit longer term than those other ones, but it's nothing serious. He may be back at practice on Thursday. He was seeing a doctor today about an injury that happened on Saturday, but it won't be anything super long-term. So to answer your question, I'll have a better idea this afternoon, but hopefully we'll have as full a group as possible. And then there's nobody that we're saying is healthy, but we're going to not play in the spring game. Everybody will play, and we want to make it competitive and have a great atmosphere out there next Saturday night.
Shane, I know you're probably tired of being asked this, but fan base obviously be very interested this past Saturday. Was there any type of separation in that quarterback room, and what were some of the pros you were able to take away from all the guys?
Yeah, I don't know if there was a separation. I know I told Phil asked that last week, and I said that there may be, and there maybe was in some ways. It was kind of tough. I thought all the quarterbacks did a great job of protecting the football. There were no turnovers at all in the scrimmage, which is rare in any scrimmage. There was a ball that Judge Collier made a great play and knocked the ball out on a fumble that Mao Bennett was hustling and fell on the ball and got the ball back for the offense. But the offense didn't turn the ball over, which was great. Now, as a head coach, you don't like it because the defense didn't create takeaways, but I thought all those guys did some really good things. Lenoris, when he was in there, made a couple nice throws as well downfield. Thought Robbie Ashford did a good job of just pocket presence and stepping up in the pocket and making throws. Dante Reno got in there and had really did some good stuff in practice on Thursday after I saw you guys last week, and did some stuff in the scrimmage. Davis Bevel as well. And then Luke worked some at quarterback. So to answer your question, not a lot of separation where I can come in here right now and say this guy's 1, this guy's 2, this guy's 3, and away we go. We're still competing, and those guys continue to make each other better. And today was a big day, and Thursday will be a big day, and then Saturday will be our last scrimmage before the spring game, and that'll be a big day also. But I like the progress that they're all making, and I, if you ask, okay, who made a jump? I thought Robbie Ashford made some nice throws and did some good stuff, but again, they're all just kind of continuing to learn everything from a mental standpoint and trying to get the game to slow down for them out there.
Speaking about slow down, let's pause things for a quick minute. You had a chance to listen to Shane, his thoughts from this past week in spring game, inter-squad scrimmage. We'll get the spring game in 2 weeks. But they had a scrimmage, and I think, look, we talked about it a little bit before we listened to Shane. I understand that when you listen to Shane there, naturally you want to be able to hear, okay, did Lenoris come out fire away, right? Was he playing out of his mind, or was there any type of separation in that quarterback room? It's difficult, and this is some of the things that I was told from the scrimmage, that as they continue to try to figure out what that offensive line room is going to look like, it's a little beat up right now, but because of that, the timing is a little bit off. Quarterbacks are having to fire away just a little bit, and from what I was told, despite there being some sacks, from a timing standpoint, if things were blocked properly, and it's not just the offensive line, the running back room is banged up too. I mean, there's opportunities where sometimes the running back has to make a block, and if they miss it, it's going to throw off the timing. I mean, we've seen that in the past. It's not just the offensive line. So, again, relaying what I was told, that in that scrimmage, there were times where wide receivers were creating separation. And if the play played out the way that it was supposed to from a timing standpoint, there would have been much more explosive plays. But again, it's a combination of, all right, at that point, that's your 8th practice of the spring. You have new faces. Defense is typically going to be ahead of the offense at this time of the year. So I wouldn't lose sleep after hearing those comments if it concerns you a little bit. And that's not me trying to blow smoke up anyone's backside. That is just calling it for what it is. Now, if we get to, I'm making this up, but if we get into the 3rd week of fall camp or the 4th week, getting ready for the first game of the season in late August, and we're hearing the same things, yeah, that's concerning. But this is spring ball. You have a lot of new faces. And again, there's some injuries that they're dealing with. So let's see if anyone has any comments here. Martin says, the timing was off last spring game as well. Almost every throw was overthrown, even with Spencer Rattler. Oscar Attaway Jr. Hi, guys. How we doing, Oscar? Good to have you on here. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be, we talked about this before, too. There's going to be growing pains with this offense. And I don't want to get so caught up on one scrimmage, especially not being able to actually see it since it was closed off to the media and to most of the public. I think some people were able to get in there, though. But again, this is what was relayed to me, that there were some pros, and we're going to hear Shane talk about some of those pros, including some of the young guys stepping up in that wide receiver room and some of the new faces just in general as well. But I think trying to find some positives from what Shane just said there, I think being able to hear that Ashford was able to make some plays, looks good in the pocket. I think the fact that Sellers demonstrated a strong arm, which we already knew that he has, but he was able to do that. And then Reno doing some good things and having some good practices as well leading up to that. Combined all of it, though, the fact that they protected the football. Now, as you heard from Shane, on the flip side of it, you would like to see your defense getting some takeaways. And there was an opportunity for the defense to get one that they just came up a little bit short. But when the timing is going to be off a little bit this early in spring, being able to protect the football, do the small things, right? Control the things that you can as an offense. And some of that's going to be trying to protect the football the best you can, not having as many stupid penalties, staying onside, the little things. So that was promising to hear. Let's go back to listen to more from Shane Beamer from today.
Nice to see you again, Shane. You mentioned
you, Alan.
Yeah, you mentioned last week that you weren't sure if the quarterbacks were going to be live in the scrimmage. Did that end up happening? And if it was, what was your assessment of the offensive line performances if the quarterbacks were live to get hit?
The quarterbacks were live. We didn't do the entire scrimmage live. I think we ended up getting, we did a little bit of extra 7-on-7 work. I think true like scrimmage work, we got around 60 plays and then some other stuff that was more like 7-on-7 where it was scrimmage, but we weren't tackling. It was more working on the passing game and stuff. So as far as the about a third of the scrimmage, the quarterbacks were live. And that was all of them. Kind of what you thought when they got hit, which they needed to. I don't like them to, but they needed to just understand they can't sit back in the pocket all day and not get hit at this level. They got to understand when they have to get rid of the ball and when they're protected or not. So you don't like them getting hit. So that goes back to, the guys around them from a protection standpoint, which they got hit a couple times. So the protection wasn't good enough. And sometimes y'all have heard me say that's the back. Sometimes that's the tight end. Sometimes that's the receivers not doing what they're supposed to do. So being able to get that corrected. But then there were a couple situations where guys scrambled out of there and you saw what they could do with their feet. Lenoris had a run where he scrambled and stepped up in the pocket and ran for an explosive run. Robbie had one where he got out on the perimeter and kind of showed what he can do. So I think we've got some athletic quarterbacks and they can make plays with their feet. And that's why we went back and forth on whether or not to make them live. And that's why we did. Thought it would be good for the defense to know that being able to finish on the guys and tackle. And then for the quarterbacks to understand, the plays they can make with their feet and when to get rid of the ball as well. But it was good for both sides, and both sides liked it without a doubt.
Hey, Shane, I wanted to ask about the receiving room. What have you seen out of them after that first scrimmage, particularly with these tight ends that you guys have been working with, since they're a little bit more experienced than some of the rest of the receiver room in terms of how you guys run your playbook?
Yeah. I think both those groups, tight ends and receivers, are doing a good job of kind of complementing each other. And there may be a day where it's, a little bit more 2 tight end personnel groupings. It might be a day where it might be a little bit more 1 tight end, 3 receiver personnel groupings, and being able to get all those guys in different positions to see what they can do. And, Josh Simon has been solid. Nick Elksness is solid. Brady Hunt, Connor Cox, Reed McKeska has been banged up. He got back out and did a little bit in the scrimmage on Saturday, which was good to see him back out there. We need him, Reed, to really come along here these next 2 weeks and take a step. And then from a receiver standpoint, Jared Brown, those trains, Juju, get used to that here in Columbia as well, that you hear that blowing also. They didn't tell you about that when you came. Jared Brown had a really nice catch and run the other day in that scrimmage. If you want to talk about people that stepped up and had great Saturdays, Mao Bennett at receiver had a great Saturday. Like, you noticed him, and the moment wasn't too big for him. And I think all those receivers, we've talked about it. We don't have necessarily a 6'3", 6'4" guy out there running around right now, but what we do have are guys that run good routes. They're quick, and we got to continue to find ways to get them the ball, because they're good with the ball in their hands. And they're making progress, and like everybody, this week will be a big week for them.
All right, we'll pause it right there. Good to hear guys are stepping up in that wide receiver room, because that's another position. We talk about the unknowns. Certainly that's one of the biggest positions that there's unknowns in. And no unknowns when you go back to the fact that from a returning Gamecock standpoint, guys who were in that room last year, we've talked about this many times. I know I'm going to sound like a broken record. Luke Doty and Nicholas Harbor produced the most last year as far as your returners in that wide receiver room. Now, there's a trio of players you brought in via the transfer portal, Jared Brown being one of them. So it's good to see that the Coastal Carolina transfer is making some plays. But if you've been paying attention to what Mao Bennett has been doing since he's arrived here, and listening to not just the coaches, but what some of the players have had to say as well, this should not surprise you. This should not surprise you. And I think back to last spring or last summer when Mao was with his teammates at Greenville High School, and he competed at one of the 7-on-7 tournaments at South Carolina. And we broke down one play in particular, one route that he ran. And if you go back and you watch that, and then you go and you watch his film from this past season and even his junior year, it shouldn't surprise you to hear it. And the reason why is, and I've been saying it for a while, when you watch Mao Bennett's tape, when you watch that one play in particular during that 7-on-7 tournament, the way he runs routes, he does it in a way that most high school players don't. And what I mean by that is he understands why he's doing it. It's not just going out there, I'm athletic, I have speed, I'll be able to create separation, which we see a lot of high school athletes do. And then once they get to the college level, the majority of them have this transitional period. And that's not to say Mao won't still have some type of transitional period, because he certainly will. But we see this transitional period where they're having to teach themselves, hey, it's not just about going out there, using my speed, using my athleticism to go up and catch a football. I have to be tactical. I have to understand why I'm running these routes. If I'm running a post corner, it's not just, okay, go up there, hit this mark, and then cut. No, it's being able to understand when I'm running it, if the defensive back opens up his hips at a certain point, that's going to allow me to get into that break and going into that from that post to that corner or whatever the route may be. So I think being able to watch him last year, seeing how smooth he is, seeing how much he already understands what he's doing from that wide receiver position and understanding the route concepts, I think it's evident that whoever the hell was the wide receiver coach at Greenville High School, and excuse me that I don't know. I apologize to you, coach out there, if you're watching. But it's evident that whoever was teaching Mazio, whether it be his high school wide receiver coach or it could have been a coach he was working out with in the offseason, or maybe he was a former player at Greenville that's now playing at the next level, or whoever it was, it's evident that he's put what he's learned from those coaches and he's applied it to his game. And I think that will allow him to be in a position in a room that desperately needs players to step up. Shane Beamer has mentioned in the past, they are looking to have at least 6 wide receivers they can count on heading into a game week in and week out. And while we've said it before, don't get too crazy, keep the pants on. It's only a couple practices in when we're talking about freshmen and transfers, okay? Relax, cool down. However, this is promising to hear. It's not just Mazio going out there and he's doing good things in one-on-ones. He's looking good in practice. He's going out there in a game-like feel setting in this inter-squad scrimmage this past weekend, which had SEC officials. The coaches, they're on the sideline. They're not out there now. They're not out there like they are during a practice. And he was able to do some good things. That's very promising to hear, especially on a day, as we mentioned, where the timing is still not fully there yet, which you'd expect through 8 practices at that point, now 9 after today's practice. So very promising to hear that Mao Bennett's making an impact. Let's take some time to look at the side. Jeremy Jones, hey y'all, watching from work. Appreciate that. Steven, stepping up in a scrimmage doesn't mean it'll happen in real games. Steven, who are you, Bear Bryant? You sound like one of those negative Nancys out there. Tell you what, buddy, go have some warm milk. You'll be okay. Thanks for weighing in. Travis Edwards, what's up, GC Live fam? What's up, Travis? Martin says, this may sound stupid, but Coach Beamer should talk more about God like Coach Staley, so some uncommon favor can also come to the football program. Zachary Baker says, I feel like we have less project receivers than we have guys who know what they're doing. There's going to be that, Zach, no question. There's no question about that. I think that the challenging part is when you lose guys like Xavier Legette, who certainly came out of nowhere last year, right? Who came out of nowhere, who stepped up for Juice Wells. I mean, let's call it for what it is. Juice Wells was your number 1 wide receiver going into the season, but because of the injuries, it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. So I think more than anything, it's being able to find a room that can just make it happen when you already know that they're going to have to use their speed more than anything. They don't have that height. They don't have that size outside of Nicholas Harbor. A lot of these guys are, under 6'3", 6'2". Some guys are under 6 feet tall. So we're going to have to wait and see how they use the skills they have. And some of that will also go back on how creative Dal Loggins can be with the play calling. I think we'll see a lot of plays that aren't just taking shots down the field vertically, which I understand this fan base wants to see a lot of. I get it. But I think we'll see more than anything a lot of sideline to sideline plays, simply because you have that speed, trying to create those matchups where you have a guy in the slot or even a guy on the outside, but especially in the slot, and you're doing some drags, you're doing some slants, you're trying to take advantage of your strengths. And I think that's what it's going to be more than anything. Will Korb says, if is Sellers taking control of the job, I know Beamer is going to do coach speak. I think we're not going to truly know, Will. I'm going to answer this 2 ways. I know this isn't the way you're actually asking it, but I don't think we're going to truly know who the starting quarterback is until a week before the game, if that. First game of the season. And the reason I say that is, as we've mentioned before in the offseason, when you have a young quarterback like Sellers, the last thing you want to do is make him feel comfortable to a point where he feels like, I already know I'm going to be the guy. So I think that is where it starts. Number 2, I also think that when you have a guy like Robbie Ashford who came here and he's trying to be the starter. I mean, let's call it for what it is. He didn't come here to simply be a backup. He didn't transfer here having started games in the SEC with the notion of, okay, I'm going to be the number 2. He came in here thinking that he's going to be the guy, and that's what you're looking for. We talked about this in the offseason. You didn't want to just bring a quarterback in from the transfer portal just to be another body, right? You needed to be able to at least bring one person in here who could really challenge Sellers. So I think that's the first thing that we look at. Going to your question, is Sellers taking control of the job? I think it's just too early to say. And that's not just based off of what Beamer's saying. I think we're just based off of some things I've been told from people that are at practice every day, who are at the scrimmage on Saturday this past week, that because of some of the growing pains that you have naturally, even going back to last year, I'm trying to think who said it. Martin mentioned with the spring game last year, the timing was off last year's spring game a little bit with Rattler. I mean, it's not just the spring game. These things happen in practice as well because it's the spring. There's a lot of new faces. So I think it's too early to tell, but there are positive things that are being said about Sellers. There are positive things. I mean, Sellers could be going out there every day looking like the Heisman candidate, for crying out loud. However, if there is some timing issues that are off, whether it be at the wide receiver position, whether it be at the offensive line position, it's going to cover up some of the positives that you're going to get from Sellers, if that makes sense. So I think it's just too early to tell right now. Let's keep it rolling. If anyone else has any questions, fire away. We got Jacob asking one. When you win, you can do no wrong. That's why Staley gets the pass for some controversial topics that some don't agree with. All right, let's keep it rolling. More from Shane Beamer from today's press conference.
Shane, in Sean's role as run game coordinator, does he work with the offensive line at all? I mean, how does he and Dowell's relationship work? Just kind of how does that come in with that dynamic?
Yeah, I'd say works very little with the offensive line. He is the run game coordinator, so there's a lot that Dowell kids with him that Sean will be drawing up run schemes in the dirt, and all of a sudden they'll show up in practice and we'll be doing something in the run game that Dowell didn't know we were doing, that Sean just kind of drew up and put in on his own. But he does a great job of continuing to build on the things that we've done in the run game, but then bring in some things that he did at Georgia State and that he liked, certainly, but marrying it with our personnel and what our guys can do. So that's where that run game coordinator comes in. He works obviously closely with everybody on the offense, but don't get me wrong, like we all help one another out there, and Lonnie may see something that affects the run game with the tight ends, and he may say something to the tight end, and Sean's coaching tight ends may see something that helps with the offensive line and the tight ends working together. So everybody, we're all on the same team right there, but Sean spends the bulk of his time with the tight ends and coaches them in practice, and certainly is there to, it's been a great relationship. He and Lonnie and he and Dow working with one another and bouncing ideas off of each other. And certainly I know that O-line is his passion, but he's been very passionate about coaching those tight ends also.
You mentioned Judge a little while ago. What's the progress? How have you seen him progress from year 1 to year 2 so far? And from that other corner spot opposite of Fortune, what'd you see from them in the scrimmage?
Yeah. Judge, I think, has done really well. And I was at the Hall of Fame thing I had to speak at last night in Gastonia. I sat with Coach Straight Heron, who had coached him in high school up in Rock Hill. And we were talking about that. Just, he's doing a great job out there. Last year, you think about it, he came in as a true freshman and started a couple games last season, and was bright-eyed and big environment for him. I think the game slowed down for him in a lot of ways. He's really attacked the weight room. He's got great length, as we've talked about before. Like, it's those arms obviously are God-given and a freakish thing that he has because he has so much length. And now he's continued to put on weight and get stronger, which is only going to help him hold up physically. So I thought he's had a really good spring and been very solid, made some nice plays out there the other day. And then he's competing, he and Emery Floyd and Vakari Swain, and then David Spalding. That's another one that didn't practice today, David, I'm sorry, was David Spalding. He's a little banged up, but those guys are all over there battling. And I think they all have their moments, and you see them all. They all kind of flash, and Vakari's got big playability, and Emery obviously has great speed. I'm proud of Emery and his maturity and kind of the steps he's taken off the field this spring. And obviously David Spalding is a veteran that's played a lot of football around here and very smart and a pro. So I like that group. And then, they're all continuing to push O'Donnell. O'Donnell obviously is the starter on the other side right now, but he knows that he needs to continue to play at a high level to keep that job too.
All right, we're going to pause this for a minute. Got some breaking news that I think some of you guys will enjoy hearing. South Carolina has picked up a commitment from 4-star wide receiver Brian Rowe of Concord, North Carolina. Share this tab real quick. Trying to do all this in live time. This just happened. So here's a look at Brian Rowe, 4-star wide receiver. Consensus rating. I expect those ratings to go up as he continues to have more information about him out there. 6'1", 175 pounds, class of 2025. You see some of the schools that South Carolina was competing against him for. We'll put down some of the other schools that you see. But this is a good pickup. Good pickup for a guy that, not too far away from you. We talk about being able to keep that fence and continue to expand it the best you can into states like North Carolina. This is a good pickup for South Carolina in a room where certainly you're trying to add talent, but add talent that you feel like can make an impact with some size and some speed. And I think the big thing too, when I look at this, we talk about the impact that Mike Furry can have on this program. He's already making an impact from a recruiting standpoint. He's already having an impact from a recruiting standpoint. Now, what I can tell you is my colleague Chris Clark just posted a story. If you want to go check this out. He becomes the second player and second wide receiver at that to join USC for the class of 2025. I believe there's a third one in there as well, but he joins fellow wide receiver Jaden Sellers. I think there's 3 commits now for the class of 2025. As a junior, he had 50 receptions for 1,063 yards and 15 touchdowns. Rowe is currently rated as the 55th best wide receiver prospect in the country and 10th overall prospect from the state of North Carolina. Rowe has had an official visit set up to check out the Gamecocks program in person coming up on June 7th. So there you go. A new South Carolina wide receivers coach, Mike Furry, has also made a significant positive impression on Rowe in the short time that he's been here. According to Chris Clark, the quote saying, quote, "He's all about business," Rowe said. "He knows what he's talking about, and I feel like he's going to make me better." So there you go. South Carolina picks up another commitment for the class of 2025. A wide receiver from the state of North Carolina. 4-star wide receiver at that. Let's see if we have his footage. I don't know if he has highlight tape up. If he does, I'll try to play it for you. Here you go. So this is his sophomore season. But to give you just an idea of what type of player South Carolina is getting, this is from his sophomore year. I'll see if we can find some updated tape on him, but at least for now, you get to see what you're getting. So, again, South Carolina, if you're just joining us, they pick up a commitment for the class of 2025, a wide receiver from the state of North Carolina, Brian Rowe. Brian Rowe committing to South Carolina on Tuesday. So, good pickup at a position that the Gamecocks certainly are looking to add talent to. And there's a lot of opportunities in that room. I mean, we know when you look at the fact that you have some transfers coming in here and you look at some of the age on these guys, it's like, all right, some of these guys are going to have a chance to be able to stick around for 2 years if they want. But at some point, you're going to have to develop some of these younger guys. And where South Carolina is at right now, that's the reason why they had to go into the portal to get 3 wide receivers. So I think being able to add another wide receiver and a guy that, again, has that speed, you would love to be able to find someone that's, tall at some point, right? A 6'3", 6'4" wide receiver, but being able to get someone that is just over that 6 feet mark, right? 6'1". Maybe he grows another inch or two. I don't know. I mean, we're talking about 17, 18-year-old kids here. It's not like they're going to stop growing. That was unfortunately the case for me, but hopefully that's not the case for Rowe and some of these other wide receivers. What we got here? And you got some punt return ability too. Yeah, talking about Addison from Sumter, talking about committing Friday. I know that Chris and Wes have been paying close attention to that as they look to see if they can pick up a commitment from the South Carolina native. Trying to pull up some information about him. So I can talk more about him. Let's see. Bear with me for a minute, folks, as you continue to watch some highlights from Brian Rowe. Try to get the information up. Let's see. Because typically I'd have intern Joe here to be able to entertain you guys while I juggle everything. They know what's going on from a recruiting standpoint much better than I do currently because of everything else that's been going on with women's basketball. And so let's see. We have Anthony Addison. For those of you who aren't familiar with him, and I appreciate it, BRC Gamecock bringing this up. Anthony Addison, a 4-star from Sumter, 6'4", 215. From talking with people, they like where South Carolina stands as far as being able to get him. Does that mean anything is a lock? I mean, I think we've all learned when it comes to recruiting, you can't take anything for granted. But from what I've been told, they like their chances. They like where they stand with this. The Gamecocks offered him back in November. He returned to Columbia in January, and the momentum has been trending towards Shane Beamer ever since. On Monday, Director of Recruiting Chad Simmons logged an expert pick for the Gamecocks to be able to land him. So if we take a look at the RPM, South Carolina, 95.7% chance of being able to land him. Chad Simmons feels 60% confident. You see Wes logged one back in March, being a little bit more conservative with that 50%. And then Duke at one point being considered the favorite. So to answer your question, it feels like things are heading that way. But we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see. But I like where South Carolina is at with him right now. I don't know for certain where he's going. I mean, there's times I can tell you, like, all right, I'm feeling really good about this. We'll wait and see. That's what I've just learned when it comes to recruiting. And a lot of you guys have been following this a hell of a lot longer than I have. I've only been with Gamecock Central since, October of 2021. So a lot of this is still new to me. Martin says, so now we have Sellers and him and already as much wide receivers as the 2024 cycle. Yeah. But I think the other thing too, Martin, which is important to know, and I'm sure you know this already, but I think just pointing this out for some people that might not, it's so weird now when we look at recruiting, especially when we're talking about high school players. because with the transfer portal being out there, as much as I'm sure Shane Beamer, Mike Furry, they'd love to be able to bring in, I'm making this up, say like 4 wide receivers, maybe each year, probably more so on the 3 end, and being able to develop them from the high school ranks. Realistically, is that going to happen year in and year out? Probably not. As Martin mentions, looking at this recruiting cycle for the class of 2025, yeah, there's already been 2 commitments at wide receiver. Do I think South Carolina will stop there? Possibly. But it's so early. And the reason why I say possibly is because they had 2 wide receivers for this 2024 class. And then they also brought in 3 from the transfer portal. So I think there is something to be said about this coaching staff, and not just this coaching staff, just the era of college football that we're in, taking advantage of bringing in experienced guys. In the past, you bring in some players and you're able to develop them. And in a perfect world, these guys don't go anywhere, right? That goes without saying. But if you have the ability to bring someone in, like a Jared Brown, like a Gage Laverdane, you bring some of these players in from the transfer portal, and you feel like you can throw a guy out there hopefully quickly because they have that veteran experience, even though it might not have been in the SEC, it might not have been at this level, that you can be able to have someone be able to get out there a little bit quicker as opposed to working on a project with a freshman. And that's not to say, as I mentioned earlier, Mao Bennett, with the way he's playing, he could crack that top 6. As I always say with freshmen, temper the expectations, but in a room where you need players to step up, it's very good to hear that he's making an impact and did some good things this past weekend in the inter-squad scrimmage. It's better than the other side of it, right? I think someone was saying earlier, it's like, well, it's just a scrimmage. Yeah. But what would you rather have? Would you rather hear that your freshman wide receiver, your true freshman wide receiver, who should still be in high school right now, came in here as an early enrollee? Would you rather hear, okay, he's struggling, he's not catching things? Would you rather hear that? No, I'd rather hear that the kid's making some progress and he's doing good things in the scrimmage. So, get out of here with the negativity on that. My goodness. Show you clearly show that you haven't put on a jock strap if you feel the other way about that. Take advantage of the fact that you have freshmen stepping up early. And certainly you want to be able to hear progress once we get into fall camp. And if a guy's able to make an impact right away for you, that's great. But in a position like that, they need someone to step up. They need someone to step up desperately. And I think Mazio, certainly when you look from a freshman standpoint, that's no disrespect to DeBron Gatling, who's done some good things, as we've heard throughout the spring. But I think Mazio could do that. I think Mazio can certainly do that. Looking at some other comments here. Travis Edwards says, Martin Elliott will definitely help. The way he runs his inside zone is a bit different and how we ran it previously. Running quarterback will always be good. I think you're talking about Ryan Montgomery. Russ Boy says, seems Elliott, talking about Sean Elliott, has a lot at his plate, though. Wonder if we explored just bringing him in as an assistant in run game and bring in another tight end coach. So one thing that Shane Beamer talked about today is that Elliott really, what is that run game coordinator title? What does it really mean for him in this program? What it really means, according to Shane today, I'm paraphrasing so that we can continue to talk about some of these prospects and recruits, that he's focused on the tight end room. That is, at the end of the day, that is where his first focus is. But he's also able to bounce ideas and things that he's seeing a little bit more freely in comparison to what a tight end coach typically would do and be able to do with the offensive coordinator, Dal Loggins, and offensive line coach, Lonnie Teasley. So there's more of a group effort in being able to have someone that has not only an extra set of eyes, but an extra set of eyes who understands the run game and how it can complement what the tight end room needs to do. So, okay, the tight end room, this is what they're supposed to be doing. What are we trying to accomplish as an offense? Okay, let's marry it and make it work the way that we need it to. And I think that will be something that we will see throughout the course of the season. I think that will be something that will improve week in and week out, simply because you have someone that has that experience of being an offensive line coach. So I expect this team to be physical, especially when you look at the running backs in that room. We know that they're a little banged up right now. We knew that some of that was going to happen. We know that there's going to be a transition for some of these guys that came in via the portal. But I also think that will be a position South Carolina will heavily lean on, especially if the offensive line can get a consistent push up front. Because guess what? If you're able to run the football, what happens? Play actions, RPOs. You're going to be able to get the defense to hopefully put an extra guy down in the box. Creates more one-on-one opportunities, maybe only one high safety for your quarterback to have to deal with. And if you feel confident with some of the speed that you have at wide receiver, they'll be able to help out your young quarterback, if indeed it is Sellers. Travis Edwards says, coaching tight ends isn't a lot. When we have pass scale, Elliott won't need to be around the tight ends. He should and could be with the offensive line and blocking tight ends. I don't know if necessarily that will be the case, Travis. I hear what you're saying. I think with the confidence that Beamer has in Lonnie, and what I would say to some people who might not necessarily agree with me, let's remember, Lonnie was in his first year as an offensive line coach for South Carolina last season. And the number of injuries that this offensive line dealt with, I don't care who the heck your offensive line coach was. You could have had Sean Elliott there. I think it had more so to do with what you were able to use at your disposal. With that being said, despite those injuries, despite it not being perfect by any means, he, meaning Lonnie Teasley, was able to help guys like Luedecke Babalade, Big Tree, and Trevon Baugh, two true freshmen who weren't here in the spring last year. Remember that. These guys got here and hit the practice field for the first time from a collegiate standpoint in August. They weren't here last spring. They weren't early enrollees. And those two guys each started over 8 games. I think Tree started in 9 and Baugh in 8. So I bring that up because he was able to help these two true freshmen get to a point where they did some good things. They did some good things last year, to a point where Luedecke Babalade, I mean, he got an accolade for what he did. So I think when we look at, okay, what can Lonnie Teasley do a little bit better? Last season taught him a lot. He talked about it last week, that you have to have more depth. You have to do more cross-training, especially at this time of the year. So I think he did a phenomenal job in the sense of being able to find a way to keep it together and being able to develop those two guys in particular to a point where it gave you a fighting chance. And certainly being able to have an experienced and talented quarterback like Spencer Rattler help you out. I mean, shoot, I don't even know where South Carolina would have been if they didn't have Rattler last year, because he was able to make a lot of things happen despite some of the issues that South Carolina had with the plethora of injuries on the offensive line. Travis Edwards again. Elliott is used to coaching a room with 15 players minimum. The tight end room is what, 6 or 7 players? Well, I'm glad you ask, because we will take a look, and this is just from a scholarship standpoint. We're talking about the tight ends as we typically do, giving you guys a look. So that is a look at South Carolina's roster from a scholarship standpoint. Not the full roster, of course, but giving you an idea of what's going on with their positional rooms when it comes to a scholarship standpoint. I'll give you the exact number, though, because I just want to make sure there's no walk-ons in that tight end room that I'm forgetting. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 8 tight ends. 8 tight ends according to the official roster for South Carolina. So 2 walk-ons and I believe that's 6 right here. 6 scholarship tight ends and 8 walk-ons. 2 walk-ons. So you get a total of 8. So to give you that answer, Travis. Shonda Randolph says, who's the number 1 tight end? I think it's easily Josh Simon. He did some good things last year. I think some people were hoping to see more from him from a pass catching standpoint, but I also felt like because of the issues that were happening on the offensive line, because of the number of injuries, he was thrust into a role where he really had to be a block first kind of tight end. And if you remember some of the clips from last August leading up to the season, he was really put in a position where he could be used as a physical blocker. I mean, he likes the physicality. We've seen that. We've also seen him make some phenomenal catches. I think of that one play in particular is in preseason where Rattler during a one-on-one drill threw it up and Josh goes up and just made a phenomenal catch. Phenomenal catch. So he can do a little bit of everything. Last season, Josh had 28 catches for 256 yards and 2 touchdowns. I expect his numbers to be up this year. At Western Kentucky, his best for touchdowns in a season was 6. That was the year before he arrived here, that 2022 season. His career high for receiving yards was his freshman season in 2019. Gets the COVID year as a relief. So that's the reason why he's able to come back, plus being able to redshirt from that 2021 season after appearing in just 1 game. So he had 430 yards receiving in 2019. His career high for receptions, 33. That came his sophomore year during that COVID season, 2020. So the reason I bring that up, I think he'll be someone, especially in the red zone area, they'll use a little bit more. You had Trey Knox ahead of him, and Knox, of course, dealt with some injuries last season. But Simon played in 12 games last year, started in 4. I expect him to, bearing any injuries, knock on wood that he stays healthy, but I expect him to be the starter week in and week out. I expect his receptions to be close to 40, if not more. And I expect him to have over 400 yards at least, and then more than double the number of touchdowns. Yeah, I think they'll really use him more in the red zone. I really do. And he has a better understanding of what they're asking him to do from an offensive standpoint. But if you go back last season, Jacksonville State, Vanderbilt had 13 receptions just in those 2 games alone. Had 13 receptions. Nearly half of his receptions last season came from the Vandy and Jackson games. So Josh Simon is a heck of a guy. Heck of a guy when it comes from a talent standpoint. Martin asks, or says, Lonnie Teasley did good in the 2022 recruiting class. Yeah, he did. I mean, you look at what they've been able to do, and it's not just on the offensive side of the ball, in the offensive line. We're talking about the defensive line too. How much they've stressed building the trenches. The depth and experience they have on paper heading into this season at both positions, it's night and day different from last year, especially on the defensive line, in that edge and defensive tackle room. A lot of talent. Whew. Well, if you guys have any final questions or thoughts, fire away. We'll wrap up in just a little bit. Good size audience. Appreciate everyone that is joining us today, whether it be on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. We appreciate you. And if you missed any of our show, we'll have it on replay on the Gamecock Central YouTube page. We'll also have this up on the Gamecock Central Podcast Network. Both of those things you can watch and subscribe to for free. John Randolph says, update me on the running backs. Well, there's been an injury bug going around, it feels like, in that room. And when I say injury bug, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek because Rocket Sanders, when he transferred in, we knew that he wasn't going to be participating in the spring. He had an injury going back towards the end of last season with Arkansas, and he had surgery on his labrum. So he hasn't been active. We knew that already. Juju McDowell, He was coming back from breaking his collarbone. I believe that was the Vanderbilt game. And he fell on it awkwardly. I want to say maybe practice 4, practice 2, around that mark early on in spring ball. And just from a precaution standpoint, they've decided to hold him out, but he'll be good to go for the beginning of fall camp. You have Oscar Attaway that's come in and he's done a phenomenal job from everything that we've been told. He's looking good not only as someone that can run the football, and I should throw in Juwan Howell as well, the 2 new additions via the transfer portal. Both those players have been running the football extremely hard. There's been a lot of situational football as of late in practice, and a lot of those situations are down the goal line and being able to have to punch it on in. And both those running backs have demonstrated that they can pick up the short yardage when you need them to. It's one of those things that gets overlooked. We're not necessarily talking about, okay, hey, being able to pick up on 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, or whatever the case may be. Could be even 4th down, right? 4th and 3, 4th and 2. But it's a part of the game that you need. And those guys have been able to demonstrate that. With Attaway, we've heard a lot about his ability to also be a threat out of the backfield as a pass catcher. He can make an impact in blocking. That's something that he takes great pride in. I think the thing with Howell is because he's so young, he has 3 years of eligibility left. He was just the true freshman last year, did some amazing things at SC State. It's not to say that he can't and won't make an impact this season, because he certainly is talented enough, but I'm interested to see what the plan is with him. Will they, number one, need him right away, or will they let him come on a little bit more gradually? And the reason I say that is you think, and it's not true apples to apples, but you think about the situation last year with Mario Anderson coming in from Division II. Howell, of course, coming in from FCS, so a step up. But at the same time, too, there's certain things that he's being asked to do that he wasn't necessarily going to be asked to do at SC State. So he's learning some of these things. So that's just, I think the beauty is you don't have to rush anything with him. You can take your time with him. He's excited to be here. I don't think you have to worry about him hitting the portal or anything like that. He wants to play at the pros and he wants to play in the SEC. A player that I feel like gets overlooked a little bit simply because of the additions via the transfer portal, the 3 players, is DJ Braswell. I was very impressed with what Braswell did in the limited time that he saw last season. Unfortunately, because of injuries in the running back room last season, because of the injury with McDowell in that Vanderbilt game, because of the injury that DK Joyner suffered late in the season, Braswell had to be a team player, and he burned his redshirt year. He had to appear in 5 games last year. What I saw from him is someone that has speed, someone that got better with being able to making impact as a blocker from a pass pro standpoint. And those are the little things. Those are the little things that South Carolina will really need this year. More than anything, you're going to need someone in that running back room that you can trust. And it's not just one guy, not just 2 guys. You want at least 3 running backs that you can trust, but someone that can step up in pass protection, someone that can provide that speed, because this is a team that's going to be relying heavily on speed. We talked about it from the wide receiver standpoint. They're going to be relying on it at the running back position too. And don't get it wrong. Don't get things twisted. Oscar Attaway, Rocket Sanders, Howell, I'd even throw Braswell in there because he's bulked up a little bit. These are guys that can also be bruisers, but they have speed. And this is a team that will truly be depending on that speed this season. Lynn Turner says, hope you're having a good Tuesday, Mike. Appreciate it, Lynn. You too. You too. John says, is Juju going to be number 1 going in? I think they're going to give him the opportunity in camp, fall camp, simply because he is the most experienced back from South Carolina. As far as, he's been here for 3 seasons, but I think ultimately it will be Rocket Sanders or Oscar Attaway competing for that number 1 job. I think Juju will make an impact, whether it be in the backfield or whether it be someone that also is out there in the slot. I think South Carolina, what we could see South Carolina coming out in a lot of two running back sets. Could be shotgun, One running back on the left side of the quarterback, one on the right side. And I think we're going to see South Carolina get creative with the talented running backs that they do have, especially early on, because you're trying to still figure out what are you going to get from that wide receiver room. Do you feel comfortable enough to put an extra wide receiver out there? Could we see 2 tight end sets? Brady Hunt, he's a guy that can make an impact as a pass catcher. Do they feel like they can put him out there and it creates a matchup that they like, that they feel like is more favorable for South Carolina's offense? That's another thing to keep an eye on. Travis Edwards says, something tells me Oscar Adaway III will be this team's Mike Davis. Would be fun. Would be fun to have a guy like that, wouldn't it, Travis? I really like the way Oscar Adaway III thinks. I had a chance to talk to him a lot when he first arrived, when they had the media availability for the transfer players, and we talked off camera. I just like the way the kid thinks. You know, he's really focused on making an impact any way he can. It's not just, okay, give me the ball and watch me run it. No, he takes pride in his blocking, as Oscar Adaway Jr., his dad, could tell you better than us. But he takes pride in blocking. He takes pride in being able to go out there, whether you put him in the slot, whether you put him out on the perimeter, and making an impact as a pass catcher too, if you need him to. So that versatility for a team that is full of questions at multiple spots on offense, that can only help you a lot. Yeah, Mike Davis, as Martin says, 2014 was a great offensive player. He was a phenomenal running back, Oscar Adaway. He was a phenomenal player, that Mike Davis. And there was actually 2 Mike Davises that South Carolina had in, probably the last 15 years, I'd say. Hope I have that number right. But Mike Davis, the one that they're talking about, the 2014, he played from 2012 through 2014. Phenomenal running back, rushed for just over 1,200 yards in 2013. Great back. Spent about 8 years in the NFL, 7 or 8 years, something like that. Played with the Baltimore Ravens in 2022. So that's Mike Davis. That is Mike Davis. There you go. There you go. All right, folks. We're going to wrap things up. Appreciate you tuning in today. It was a fun one. If you missed any of our show, like I mentioned earlier, head on over to the Gamecock Central YouTube page. Subscribe for free. Hit the little bell icon. You get notified anytime one of these shows drops. If you're a podcast listener, we'll also have these shows available on the Gamecock Central Podcast Network. Again, congratulations to Don Staley and the Gamecocks winning their 3rd national championship in program history. If you missed it yesterday, they will be having a parade on Sunday that will be on Main Street. It'll be finishing up on the steps of the State House. That will be starting at 2 o'clock. So come on out. Hopefully the weather's nice, and we'll keep things rolling for Gamecock football. They'll be back in action for practice number 10 on Thursday. Players, handful of players, still to be announced. We'll speak tomorrow. We'll have updates for you on Gamecock Central, and then a few coaches will be speaking with us on Thursday, and then the team will be holding their 2nd scrimmage. Unfortunately closed again, but that will be on Saturday. And then a week from now, a week and a half actually from that, will be the Garden and Black Spring game. So we're getting closer to that. Again, appreciate everyone that tuned in today. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday and enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you Thursday on GC Live Afternoon Drive.